It was wrong, but Adrien was happy that his teacher released him from piano lessons early due to feeling unwell. But there wasn't anything that could make him feel badly when he got to spend more time with Marinette. The past 3 months with her had been some of the happiest moments in his life. He exited the parlor and went directly to the aquarium room. He entered, and his greeting to her was on the tip of his tongue when his stomach plummeted at the sight before him. He rushed forward to see 2 divers trying to hold Marinette down as she thrashed wildly against them. "Marinette!" Hearing his voice, she craned her neck to look at him, terror in her eyes. She escaped their grasp and tried to swim to him, only to be grabbed again. Adrien banged on the glass and shouted for them to stop, but they paid him no mind. He saw one of them holding a syringe and felt his gut wrench. Abandoning his spot, he rushed towards the door to go upstairs. But before he made it out, his father appeared and blocked him. "Get out of the way," he spat, not caring that it was his father that he raised his voice at. But Gabriel didn't budge and held him in place. "What are you doing to her?" he seethed, anger burning in his eyes. Gabriel tried to ignore the uncharacteristic expression his son wore, but he felt a slight stab in his chest. He looked so much like his mother, his expression mirroring the one she wore the last time Gabriel saw her awake. Being painfully reminded of her current state only furthered his resolve. "Nothing for you to get so riled up over. She will be fine," Gabriel replied monotonously. Adrien turned around to see that the divers were gone. All that was left was a Marinette who was hugging herself tightly as she sunk to the aquarium floor. Adrien ran back over to her and called her worriedly. "Marinette," he called, but she didn't seem to hear him. "Marinette, are you okay?" The girl turned to him, eyes full of hurt. She averted her eyes before turning away. She slowly swam away from him and buried herself within the protection of the plants that kept her well hidden. She seemed upset with him, as if he were part of the whole scheme. He might as well have been. Despite his feelings of wanting to free her, he had given up before he even tried. He enjoyed being with her so much that he had almost forgotten that she was there against her will. So even if he wasn't the one directly responsible for her dilemma, his impassiveness made him feel utterly despicable. He peered at the curled-up girl, and his heart ached for her. Adrien clenched his fist against the glass and leaned forward, resting his forehead against the cool surface. He heard his father approach him, and he opened his eyes to look at the reflection of the water dancing across his shoes. Without moving from his position, he spoke up. "What are you trying to accomplish?" Adrien asked wearily. He had never once seen his father as untrustworthy, but at the moment he felt that Gabriel was truly terrifying. His father was cold, yes, but Adrien never imagined that he would keep someone captive and hurt them. He recalled that Gabriel didn't consider Marinette anything more than a mere sea creature, but how could anyone look at her and not see that she was just like them? He ran all of the various expressions he'd seen her with across his mind, all the emotions that clearly told him that she was no less than humans. And her voice, the voice that spoke his name happily every time he came to see her, was more than enough to prove Gabriel wrong. "I have a good reason for doing this, Adrien," Gabriel said, even though his tone showed that he didn't care for explaining himself. Adrien let out a bitter laugh. "And what reason is that? What the hell could you possibly say that would justify this?" Adrien mocked him, but Gabriel knew better than to return his son's anger. "Your mother," Gabriel said simply. Adrien stood straight and turned to face his father, face covered in utmost confusion. Gabriel took his silence as a request to clarify what he meant. Countless stories and tales have spoken of mermaids as being eternally youthful, maybe even immortal creatures. It's said that if you feasted on the flesh of a mermaid, you would surely enjoy those benefits. Adrien felt a burning and sour taste at the back of his throat, and he glared viciously at the man he called his father. He banged his fist against the glass, making sure to grab Marinette's attention. He wanted to let her know that he was on her side. If he had to go against his father, so be it. "Don't you dare!" "Relax." Gabriel rubbed his temple, feeling tired from watching Adrien's display of anger. "I'm not interested in immortality. I simply want for your mother to recover. Mermaid's blood has been touted as a miraculous panacea," he explained. "As soon as I'm assured of your mother's well-being, the mermaid will be freed." Despite Gabriel's reasoning, the frown didn't leave Adrien's face. Make no mistake, Adrien would love to have his mother back, but to do what his father was currently doing? "You know she wouldn't approve of this." Adrien narrowed his eyes at his father. The man simply nodded with an "I know" before turning heel and leaving the room. Adrien sighed, feeling some of his anger dissipating. His father's methods were wrong, but Adrien couldn't stay mad, not while he understood what was going on through Gabriel's mind. Most people assumed that Adrien was most affected by the sudden affliction that struck his mother, but Gabriel was devastated. Adrien knew better than anyone how much his father adored his mother. Considering how he, himself, was ready to fight his father tooth and nail for hurting Marinette, he didn't have much room to talk. He leaned against the glass case and slid to the floor. "I'm sorry, Marinette." He looked over his shoulder to see her watching him, a guarded expression on her face. "Shall we bust you out of here?" He gave her a sheepish grin before facing forward again. Marinette was surprised by the suggestion. She studied his slumped-over position and wondered what was going through his mind. Even after finding out the reason for her captivity, he wanted to help her escape. She rose from her spot and swam towards him. "Tell me about your mother." Adrien hadn't expected her to make conversation with him. After spending months trapped in an unknown place, he was sure that she'd jump at the chance of escaping. But she just overlooked his suggestion and asked about his mother, the ultimate reason why she was being held captive in the first place. She was... He paused, closing his eyes to try to bring forth any image of his mother from when she was still awake. It'd been almost 4 years now since the incident, and he feared that his memories of her were beginning to fade. She was beautiful. He opened his eyes and peered across the empty darkness of the room. The mansion had become so much colder since then. His mother was very much the sunlight that kept the household warm. "Sorry," he chuckled. "That wasn't much of a description. Let's see." Marinette watched him sadly as he seemed to ponder his next words. From their time together, he had never mentioned his mother. She assumed that the woman was not present in his life, be it dead or alive. She was kind and energetic, but she was also sort of silly. The staff loved her. They'd often joke about how she and my father were such a mismatched pair. She was the only one who could talk him down. You didn't want to get on her bad side. Boy, did she have a temper. He laughed at the memory, and Marinette couldn't help but feel sorry for him. He was still turned away from her, and she couldn't tell what kind of expression he was making. Even though he had laughed, she was sure his eyes held that look of desolation she saw whenever he spoke of his father. When Adrien finally turned to her, he offered her a soft smile to reassure her that he was alright. He could see it in her expression that she was curious about what happened, though she didn't dare ask. "It happened when I was 13. Mother had complained about being unwell, frequent headaches and such. Father urged her to see a doctor, but she was convinced it was just migraines. Then one day she got into an argument with Father and locked herself in the parlor. My piano teacher and I found her unconscious there when we entered for my lessons." "Adrien," Marinette whispered sympathetically. She wished she could reach through the glass, hold him and comfort him. She thought about how terrifying it must have been for him to find his mother like that. It turned out that the headaches were caused by an aneurysm. It ruptured and she had a stroke. We rushed her to the hospital and they were able to save her, but she hasn't woken since," Adrien finished explaining. "Father, Adrien sighed and ran a hand through his hair. It was clear at this point that Gabriel wanted to use Marinette in hopes of rousing his wife from her coma. She understood completely. After all, this wasn't the first time a mermaid was captured due to the legend surrounding their kind. The number of mermaids had dwindled drastically over the ages due to the capture and slaughter for their flesh. However, such tales of immortality were unfounded. Even mermaids themselves weren't immortal. It wouldn't make sense for their flesh to be able to grant such a thing. Fortunately, the tales of their existence began to fade and whatever remnants remained were taken as a myth. Their population was only beginning to recover, but then Marinette had gotten caught. Her dread increased each passing day, knowing that her carelessness put her whole kind at risk. "Is it true?" Adrien spoke again, breaking the silence that had fallen upon them after he finished talking about his mother. Marinette looked at him questioningly. He found himself unable to keep eye contact with her, feeling shameful for wanting to know if what his father said about mermaids was true. "No, neither our blood nor our flesh have such powers. Why would anyone want to continue on living, perpetually watching their loved ones pass on?" Marinette asked, eyes distant and voice hollow. "Are merpeople immortal?" he had to ask. The lorn expression in her eyes made him wonder if she was speaking from experience. "No," she met his eyes. "Tales of our eternal youth are simply misunderstandings. Mermaids are just like any other creature in the sea. We live and then we die." "Then we should tell my father that," Adrien straightened up. "Explain to him that his plan isn't going to work." But Marinette stayed silent at his suggestion. She closed her eyes and shook her head. "It's too late.